Yo, Elder Scrolls God here, coming at you live from the Planet Fitness parking lot. Today, we're going to talk about Talos. We're going to talk a lot about Talos. Maybe some may say too much. Not me, though. I don't think there's ever too much talk about Talos. So, starting off, for some of you may be a little confused. He's Talos. What the hell is this guy talking about? For those of you who don't know, and I guess that'd be all of you, this channel will be dedicated to the lore of the Elder Scrolls, particularly the weird aspects of the Elder Scrolls. That's what I'm partial towards, I guess you could say. And I thought, yeah, what a great topic to start with. You know, Talos, God of Men, very controversial right now in Skyrim. You know, you say his name and next thing you know, the Thalmor Justgarls are knocking down your door. It's crazy, right? Right? Well, you know, we can get into that. We can get into that, but I guess first we'll just do a short little introduction. I don't know what time it is, what's going on where you are, but it's about to be 4th of July, so happy 4th of July to any of my American viewers. You know, I bet Tiber Septim, he'd be a big 4th of July guy. I don't remember the specific date of his ascension, but that would probably be his equivalent to the 4th of July, if I had to speculate. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting off topic, but yeah. Elder Scrolls God, that's me. Welcome to the channel. Brand new channel. Never done anything like this before. You could probably tell by my scatterbrained ramblings. But yeah, I'm just here to talk about the Elder Scrolls. I do that a lot. I watch a lot of Elder Scrolls videos. I read a lot about the Elder Scrolls, and I figured, hey, you know, I might as well talk about it. At least try and get some interaction with it, because, you know, no point just reading it for nothing. So yeah, that's what this is. This is just kind of a place where I'm just gonna talk about random crackpot theories and weird concepts in the Elder Scrolls. So yeah, if that's your kind of thing, I hope you stick around and give it a try, give it a shot. And yeah, let's get right into it. So, Talos. For you guys who've played Skyrim or Oblivion or any of the Elder Scrolls games, really, I think they all mention Talos to agree. But let's look at Skyrim for a second, because if you're watching this video, you probably at least played Skyrim. So, and if you've played Skyrim, you've been to Whiterun. We all know Whiterun. We love Whiterun. Love and hate Whiterun, maybe. I don't know what your proclivities are. But if you've been to Whiterun, then you've probably heard a little guy by the name of Heimskr standing in front of a certain someone's statue, preaching the good word. Now, the man in question that Heimskr is singing so much praise of is none other than our boy Talos. Now, you may have possibly asked him, Mr. Heimskr, who is Talos? And he'll tell you. He'll say Talos. He'll give you a wonderfully crafted response. Me, on the other hand, mine is a little more impromptu, a little more avant-garde. My quick rundown of Talos, basically, right? He was a man, mortal man, conquered all of Tamriel through dubious methods, which we will go over, trust me. And yeah, he conquered all of Tamriel, and then, according to, depending on who you believe, he was so great and awesome and just so damn cool that he ascended to the realm of gods and became Talos, god of men. So, of course, there's no Talos the god without Talos the man. And I think, like any good story, we have to start at the beginning. Unfortunately, or fortunately maybe, because, you know, I get to talk about some cool lore stuff. Talos, the man known as Talos, his origin is very convoluted. It's very, depending on who you ask. He has a couple different origin stories, but there's two main ones that I really want to discuss that are probably, I mean, out of the two of them, they're probably the most likely, with one being the most likely, and I'll tell you which one I agree with once I talk about them both. So we'll start with, we talked about Heimskr, and you can ask Heimskr about Talos, and like I said, he'll give you a very detailed response, but the long short of it is that Talos, according to him, and I believe this would be the Nordic view of Talos, is, I believe, you know, that's what Heimskr holds as well, is that Talos was born in Atmora under the name Talos, and he came to Skyrim. I'm not quite sure. I believe it would be the second or third era at this point. Probably the third era. I think it's the third era. I'll have to remember to do some more research and get that right next time, but yeah, let's just say third era for right now. And he came to Skyrim and was involved in various different skirmishes and battles around that time. I believe there was a lot of war going on in the Reach, like, you know, around Skyrim's border with High Rock, in the Dragontail Mountains, and all that fun business. Well, if you've played Skyrim, that would be kind of where the Forsworn and Markarth are and all that. And also, if you've played Skyrim, you might be familiar with Old Hroldan, which is a location in the Reach, which kind of does a unique little segue into another origin story of Tiber Septums. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to spoil you there. As you can see, Talos has many different names that get very, very confusing sometimes. But anyways, let's continue with the Nordic view. So we have Talos, and he comes to Skyrim, and he's fighting in the Reach primarily. And he meets this guy, Kulakane, who is, I believe he is the king or Jarl of Falkreath. Yeah, he's the Jarl of Falkreath. And he recruits a young Talos. And they fight together, and Talos starts proving his worth, basically, even though he's very young at this time. And it all culminates in the Battle of Old Hroldan, in which General Talos, leads a force that was vastly outnumbered and seemed to have no chance of winning. And as they were camped outside, a storm cloud approached a young Talos, kind of entered his tent, which is a very strange thing to imagine. A storm cloud just kind of unzipping your tent and being like, "Hey man, I've got some cool knowledge for you." But this storm cloud was actually Ysmir Wolfarth, the Ash King, sent by the Greybeards to guide a young a young Talos who at the time didn't know but was dragonborn, and therefore the Greybeards kind of were leading him on this path through Wolfarth. So Wolfarth comes to give counsel to young Talos, and then the next day, when him and his army approach the gates of Old Hroldan, Talos summons a storm cloud with just his voice, and it shields his entire army from all the like arrows and any sort of like things being like fired at them and stuff. And they storm Old Hroldan and against all odds take the I don't know if it was a city or whatever, but they win, basically. They win. And after that, Talos was known as Storm Crown for what he had done. So that's where you hear Talos Storm Crown, that's where that comes from. But now that's a perfect way to segue into the other origin story of Talos and a entirely new name in which we know Talos by, which is Hjalti Earlybeard. Now, I said before, for those of you who have played Skyrim, and when I mentioned Old Hroldan, that might have caught your attention. In Skyrim, if you, the player character, rent a room in the Old Hroldan Inn, you can rent Tiber Septim's room. Again, that's a whole nother thing, but that's Talos. You can rent Talos's room, and if you do, and you spend the night, when you wake up in the morning, and you come out into the foyer, the main area, there'll be a ghost sitting there, and if you go up and talk to him, he'll mistake you for someone, and that someone he mistakes you for is none other than Talos, who he is calling Hjalti. So the ghost is asking for Hjalti's sword, and he goes into this kind of story about just a big reference to the battle I was just talking about, in which Hjalti Earlybeard, or otherwise known as Talos Stormcrown, led that victory with the help of Wolfarth as the storm cloud. And so that's where the name Hjalti comes from. And then I guess since I've already said it a few times, Tiber Septim is the name he would take later in life after he became Emperor of Tamriel. So another thing about the very convoluted history of Talos is that even though his name changes, like, you have Talos of Atmora basically versus Hjalti of High Rock. Even though his names are referenced differently, the events that take place in his life are, for the most part, from what I believe, pretty concrete. Like, they're pretty solid. Like, there's not a lot of discrepancies other than like kind of where he came from. That's really the most debated thing. In my opinion, it would be kind of unlikely to have him come from Atmora. Just it being such, I know like Atmoran migrations lasted for quite a while, we're led to believe, but like, I don't know, it seems like a stretch for the Nords. Like, I know Hybsker, he's out there, he really wants it to be true, but it most likely he could still be of Nordic descent possibly, but most likely came from High Rock. So again, yeah, I subscribe more to the Hjalti Earlybeard. And then I also believe that he became known as Talos after the Old Hroldan incident. Talos Stormcrown became his name from there. But now that we've gotten his origin out of the way, we can start to get into the real nitty-gritty, the cool stuff that's a little more concrete. And that starts kind of after the Battle of Old Hroldan, where now he's General Talos of Cuhlcain's army. And at this point in time, Cuhlcain, the Jarl of Falkreath, I believe, he's on a warpath straight for the Ruby Throne, straight for the capital of Cyrodiil. Like, he wants to be emperor. And with General Talos at his side, through many battles, and like, you know, at this time there was a warring period. The Riemann Empire was gone and dead. You know, the sassy potentates had taken over and they got assassinated, and the empire was really in shambles, so there was no one to lay claim to the throne. And Cuhlcain and Talos basically, they were the ones who made it to the end, and it kind of gets a little fishy as to like how they got there. You know, everyone wants to talk about Talos being like a very brave and honest and honorable tactician, but you know, war is war, so he probably wasn't as honorable as people say, and there are doubters and haters, you could say, even of Talos that would probably go along with that idea that he was not so noble in his actions. But either way, Cuhlcain and Talos secure basically the Ruby Throne. That Cuhlcain is he has the Emperor of Tamriel basically in his grasp. Like, he's about to do it. But then suddenly, out of nowhere, an assassin comes in, kills Cuhlcain, I believe maybe his wife, and maybe a child or kid, like he had a son or something. I don't know. But he's dead. They're all dead. Talos, though, miraculously survives. However, his throat was slit, and he could no longer speak. Now, a big thing about Talos up until this point is he was known ever since the Battle of Old Hroldan. His voice was known for not only inspiring the hearts of his troops, but also just like performing miraculous feats with his voice, very similarly to like how the Nords of Skyrim and the Dragonborn of Skyrim, you know, would use the voice. That's pretty much what he was doing too. But it was also, you know, a very deep facet of it was the inspiration it would give to his soldiers. So now that his throat is slit and he basically can only speak in a whisper. So they find him, and Cuhlcain is dead, and basically Talos is the only person alive still. But his throat is slit. And he, as the only successor, inherits the title of Emperor. And this is a really cool lore bit. When he goes to give his speech, even though his voice is a whisper, it still inspires the same amount of you know, the passion and the fury and the love in the hearts of the people. Seeing seeing Talos in this state, giving this speech, it's a very powerful thing to think about. But on that high note, we now have to talk about the darker side to this possible, you know, to this coronation. There is a theory proposed by this character known as the Underking, who is from Daggerfall, I believe, and that's a very important character that's gonna come up a lot later when we start talking about post Emperor Talos. And I guess at this time I should also say Talos took an imperial name, which is Tiber Septim. That's where Emperor Tiber Septim. And if you're familiar with the games, you would know of his descendants and his dynasty, which was the Septim era. You know, you have Uriel Septim the Seventh, and all the Septims basically. It's one of the longest reigning dynasties. But yeah, so there is a big discrepancy when it comes to the the coronation, the kind of gaining of emperorship for Tiber Septim, because due to the conditions of the assassination, there's a lot of people who believe that Tiber Septim himself was the one who, maybe at the very least, orchestrated the assassination, if not carried it out himself. And that's, it is very suspicious that he is the last one standing, and that his throat was slit, but he can somehow still talk, like he's alive and can still talk, albeit in just a whisper. But it's very suspicious, and it didn't fly under the radar how suspicious it could definitely be. But regardless of the suspicious conditions, Tiber Septim was now the emperor of Tamriel. And this, like I said, this is where things start to get really cool, and we can introduce a new character and bring back an old character. So let's start. We'll bring back, I hope you remember, Ash King, Ysmir Wolfarth. Ladies and gentlemen, give him a round of applause. So basically, he is back. He's been there the whole time, but he's kind of just he's serving as more of a kind of a guide and a force alongside Tiber Septim. Like I said, Tiber Septim at this point would have learned of his dragonborn nature, of course, being emperor, and in order to be emperor and wear the Amulet of Kings, you have to be dragonborn. I'm not quite sure what happens to you if you're not. You probably might die or something crazy happens to you, but he at some point, during this time, has learned he's dragonborn, and he is a true emperor of Tamriel, as he can wear the amulet and fulfill the pact of Elysia with Akatosh by wearing the Amulet of Kings. So, yeah, and Wolfarth has been here kind of the whole time, guiding him and helping him along this path. And also, this is where we can introduce a new character in the form of his companion and battle mage and friend, Zurin Arctis, who is a very, very cool character, a battle mage. He's like kind of that classic mad scientist vibe. Really cool guy. And he's basically like Tiber Septim's right-hand man as being the emperor. And so the three of them, and I know Wolfarth is more of a like I said, a kind of a guiding force, but I still consider him as part of it. The three of them basically go on this long and bloody conquest of Tamriel in its entirety, just trying to get everything into the Empire, basically one unified Tamriel. And of course they have some issues. I'm sure, I'm not concrete on all the details. I'm pretty sure High Rock and Skyrim probably went along with it fairly easily. Hammerfell might have been a tougher sell alongside, like Valenwood and Elsewhere. Yeah, Valenwood and Elsewhere. Those were probably a little tougher of a sell. Blackmarsh, I know that's what the Riemann dynasty was really struggling with, was Blackmarsh and Morrowind. But Tiber Septim managed both. The way he got Morrowind was actually really important, because at the time, you have to understand, the Tribunal were ruling over Morrowind, and Tiber Septim was only an emperor at this point. And so, but he did have a massive army to show up at the gates of Morrowind with. And the Tribunal at this point, they were the Dagoth had kind of, he was in the picture at this point, so their connection to the heart was severed, but they didn't really want anyone to know. So instead of going to all-out war, just using godly powers to smite Talos, they proposed a deal in which Morrowind would join the Empire, but there were a lot of benefits for Morrowind. Like, they got to keep a lot of their autonomy in the Empire. But the important condition was that Talos Tiber Septim was gifted the Numidium. He wasn't told of the Heart of Lorkhan, but he was gifted the Numidium. Now, for those of you who don't know, or who aren't familiar with the Numidium, it was basically a massive golem / automaton made by the Dwemer, specifically the High Lord and tonal priest / architect Kagranak of the Dwemer. And this all goes back to like early First Era stuff with the Dwemer and the early Chimer and the beginning of the Tribunal. It's all stuff involving the Heart of Lorkhan. And basically the Numidium was Kagranak's ultimate tool / weapon / device. Yeah, you know, he was basically going to use the Heart of Lorkhan to activate the Numidium. The Numidium, I mean, it's highly debated as to what his true intentions were, but he was going to use the Numidium and the Heart of Lorkhan to do some really crazy metaphysical, godlike, reality-bending stuff. Anytime the Numidium is involved, just know it's bad news. Like, it's not going to go well for time, at least. And so Tiber Septim now is in possession of this basically like nuclear bomb equivalent, maybe even like more, you know, probably more destructive than a nuclear bomb, like, but he doesn't know, he's not aware of the heart. He just has the shell. He has no way to operate it. And so he continues his conquest, but now Zurin Arctis, this is like, the Numidium is like, you know, that's like his dream come true. As a battle mage and astute wizard, he's just shitting himself. Like, he's so happy right now. Can't believe he's got like the artifact. Like, this is like pulling like the rarest like Pokemon card in the world right now. Like, he is just head over heels happy. So he starts studying this thing like crazy, and it doesn't take him too long to realize that it's missing a power source. And through his research and just through, like, you know, study and all that, like I said, he is a very powerful wizard. Like, that should not be understated. Zurin Arctis is like, he's really powerful. Like, the stuff he came up with, he was mad, like, he was crazy, but he was definitely a genius in his own right. Because he discovered basically that the Numidium was missing a power source, and he was able to figure out, and I don't know if this is like concrete in the lore, but it makes a lot of sense if it's not already in the lore already. Like, it should be. Like, basically he figures out that the power source had a connection to Lorkhan. He basically realizes that the Heart of Lorkhan was the power source. And he's like, well, shit, the Heart of Lorkhan is under the protection of the Tribunal. We can't get that. So he's like, fuck, what do we do? And he has no idea. But then, being the genius, crazy-ass wizard he is, he's like, oh, hey, Wolfarth, you're a Shezarene, right? Now, for those of you who don't know, Shezarenes in the Elder Scrolls universe are basically like avatars of Lorkhan. Like incarnations, mortal incarnations of Lorkhan. So they possess kind of inherently a piece of Lorkhan. Almost like how the Dragonborn is like granted kind of a soul of Akatosh almost. I don't know. But yeah, they're basically like mortal avatars of Lorkhan. Meaning that they could kind of fill that role that the Heart of Lorkhan fulfilled theoretically to a degree. So that's the theory that Zernarctus goes with, and he goes buck wild. He builds a giant soul gem known as the Mantella. And his plan is basically to trap Wolfarth in the Mantella and use it to power the Numidium with Tiber Septim. And from here on out, things start to get really crazy. So at this point now, right, Tiber Septim only has one place left to conquer to completely unify Tamriel and fulfill like his goal. And that place is the Somerset Isles, the home of the High Elves, the Altmer. Now, if you've played Skyrim, you know the one thing that everybody knows about the Thalmor is that they hate Talos. Like, they really hate Talos. They just, like, kill people all over. When they, like, sacked the capital and they signed that white gold concordat or whatever with the Empire, they were so adamant about that Talos thing. They even pulled up to Skyrim. Skyrim's got a whole civil war going on right now, all over this Talos guy. Why do they hate Talos so much, you may ask? Well, I'll tell you. Tiber Septim and Zernarctus, and Wolfarth for his part too, were all brainstorming. They were scheming. They're like, how can we conquer the Somerset Isles? You gotta keep in mind, the Somerset Isles, the High Elves, they are very powerful. Like, they're not like a joke. Like, they don't play around. No Elder Scrolls race really plays around. I mean, the Bretons, come on. The Wood Elves, unless they go wild hunt, come on. The High Elves, on the other hand, they do not mess around, especially when it comes to men. So, like, Tiber Septim pulls up, and they're like, yeah, okay, buddy. Little do they know, at this point, Zernarctus, he's let Tiber Septim in on the Mantella, the whole plan. And Tiber Septim's like, bet. So they pull up, and they summon Wolfarth as well. And they're like, hey, Wolfarth, we have a really cool idea. Like, you gotta see it. Wolfarth's like, let me hear it. And Zernarctus is like, yeah. Shoots a freaking fireball at him or something. I don't know. Goes like crazy, starts trying to kill him. Wolfarth's like, nah. Starts fighting back, but they both get fatally wounded. Tiber Septim at this point, he's just kind of, I don't know, maybe he's like hiding behind a table or something. I don't know what he's doing. But he's basically watching in the sidelines as Zernarctus and Wolfarth both simultaneously kill each other and are sucked into the Mantella. Now, I don't think this is necessarily canon. I'm not sure. But I believe that Zernarctus is also a Shezarene. I mean, it makes sense in my headcanon. Whether or not it's actual canon, I am not completely sure. But it makes a lot of sense later down the line. So basically now, they're both in the Mantella. And Tiber Septim, he knows like everything that Zernarctus was up to this point. So he's like, that really sucks about my friend and my mentor. But I really want to conquer Somerset Isles. So yeah, he uses the Mantella and the Numidium, and I mean, like I said before, anytime the Numidium is involved, some bad juju goes down. And it's not necessarily a dragon break that happens, but using the Numidium to conquer the Somerset Isles, like Tiber Septim does, has pretty horrific consequences for the High Elf people. One of the specific ones that like always kind of like sticks out to me and I hear referenced a lot, or maybe not as much as it should be referenced, is there's like a specific story, I think it's a Michael Kirkbride text, where he mentions that because of the Numidium's like time-altering properties, during the siege of the Somerset Isles, there was a specific timeline created in which any warriors from the Somerset Isles, from both sides probably, that were trapped in this timeline were basically trapped endlessly fighting against the Numidium. And that's just like, it's like a horrifying existence. So it kind of almost, even though it's not a canon piece of lore, if you work that into the Thalmor's like justification for hating Talos so much, you can kind of see it. Like, the Numidium is not a joke. So like when he activated it, it's basically like, I don't know, it's just like, it's a lot of the horror of it all probably stayed with them for a while, because elves live long time, man. So, you know, they probably, their granddad was seeing it like our granddad saw Vietnam or something, you know, had the crazy war stories. But yeah, after it's all said and done, Tiber Septim now stands as the emperor of a unified Tamriel for the first time in history. No empire was able to succeed in this task before Tiber Septim, and he stands alone as emperor of a unified Tamriel. And so you ask now, where does one go from here? And unfortunately, guys, I gotta say, I'd love to continue, but I want to do a little more research before we go into this next little bit, because I want to start referencing maybe some quotes and stuff. So I'm gonna leave this one here. Leave this as like a part 1. Part 2, I'll try and get up as soon as possible. I just want to make sure, like I said, I have some cool references and stuff for you next time. Anyways, this has been Elder Scrolls God. Thank you for watching, and wherever you are, have a good night.